Veterans of the Industrial Army, Hogansville Mills, Hogansville, Georgia, June the 27th, 1927. Photos by Home Studio,
LaGrange.
LaGrange, Georgia.
Now, who were the veterans of the Industrial Army? What is that about?
That's employees who make them the money, who produce the goods.
Now, who came up with the idea of the Industrial Army? Who came up with the idea for the Industrial Army?
Management.
Was that a joke or they were serious?
No, No, it was, I think it was a tribute to the people there.
Okay. Why did they make this picture?
Well, that I couldn't tell you.
Wait, excuse me. I'm going to have to move this just a little closer. There. I'm going to have to move it. You don't have to lean forward. That's okay. You just sit back.
Right,
I'm going to...
okay.
Okay. So, was it usual for them to make group portraits of everybody?
Now do what now?
Was it a usual practice for them to make group portraits?
Oh yeah. They did that quite often. They had many of them.
Okay.
Did you get that?
Yeah. Could you bring your seat closer to the table?
Move your big foot over.
Okay.
My wife be getting on me talking to you like that. I don't mean nothing.
Okay.
Okay. I think it was a tribute to the people that worked in there to gather them together and have pictures made. People like to have the pictures made. I don't care who they are. They may be a best professional in anything, movie star, in baseball, football, music, whatever, opera. People like to have the pictures made. You know that, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Well, when this picture was made, and for many years, I could tell you everybody that's on here by name. But I don't know whether I can get a third of them now or not.
Why don't we try?
All right. And let me say this, I may not get nothing but their not their given name, but the other name,
Their
surname.
family name, okay.
Family name. Now let me look a little bit. This man here was one of the best men ever lived in Hogansville. His name was Ben Thrower. He has a son that lives here, it's a minister now. The other day when Mr. George asked me did I know Homer Welch. That's Homer Welch. He turned out to be the big man in the Union in Hogansville. Was a good man, but he got out of grace with the manufacturing people here. I'd say that. That's the only way I know how to say it. He was the only one they got with a gun the day that they picked up 7 pistols on the ground, but they took a pistol off of him up at Union, the bunch that went into the... Let me come back to this guy. This is the first man that was my supervisor when I first come to Hogansville. His name was Ed Blackman. His job was in the finishing where they made the cloth, carried it in to be inspected, manifested, rolled up, ready to be shipped. That was his job. He was overseer of that department.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to hold the picture because that way you won't hit it when we're recording, okay?
Okay.
Do you need to? Okay. So after you know who you want to talk about, then you... So, you know, before I got a little disturbance when you mentioned Homer Welch. So I wonder if we could... Since, you know, we spent so much time talking about that strike.
Yeah. You want me to go back? You want me to go back over it?
Well, just go back and tell me about Homer Welch.
Tell you about Homer Welch?
Yeah.
Well,
You don't need to hold a picture for that.
Homer Welch was a fine citizen of Hogansville. He was a church-going man. He was a good family man. He married into one of the finest families in Hogansville, and he was well thought of. Everybody liked him. He had leadership capabilities, I'd say. When we organized the union, we elected him as president of the union, of the local here. And he worked well with the people. And he stuck it out to the very last. And I don't know, but I think it cost him a lot of money and maybe served a little time on account of this pistol.
Now, what happened when you said, you told me that he was caught with a pistol. Could you tell me
Well,
that
this is
story?
when the last trip that the flying squadron made out of Hogansville. And I was telling you, another fellow and I was going fishing up the railroad track. And they waved the sticks at us and called us all kind of names, so they're going to beat the you-know-what out of us. And I told my friend, I said, I hope every damn one of them gets in jail today. Now, pardon this, I ought not say that. I don't want to use that word anymore, okay? You want to exit out? Okay. I told my friends, I said, my friend was with me, I said, I hope every one of them gets locked up today. I didn't know where they was going. They went all over the country, honey, and stopped mails off. But they were going to the plant that my great uncle, my dad's uncle, was superintendent of. And somebody had tipped my uncle, Will Reynolds, off that the flying squadron was coming from Hogansville to stop his plant. And he called Gene Talmadge, who then was governor of Georgia. Gene Talmadge says, I'll have the state guard out there at the edge of town. When they pull up, you call the law and they'll bring them in. And that's what happened. And these guys, of course, when you surround them about 150 guys with them guns, you saw the picture of it. They began to drop pistols out of their pants, down their pants leg, and shake them out, and didn't want to be caught with them. But Homer didn't. He kept his in his pocket. And so naturally the law in Newnan, Georgia, made a case against him for carrying a pistol without a license, without a permit. And it took him a good bit of time to get out of that. You know, you have to have a permit to carry a pistol. I can show you one.
A permit or a pistol? A permit or a pistol?
I can show you the pistol, I can show you the permit.
That's
right?
okay. You don't have to do that.
Okay. All right. I just got a new permit. The reason I carried one, I was in the bonding business a long time. You go on people's bond to keep them out of jail, and sometimes you had to go get them. Or you could go anywhere over the world and get them if you was in the bonding business and bring people back. And I bought a pistol, and I've had it ever since. I wouldn't hurt anybody with it. Don't intend to.
Now, were you there when they nominated Homer Welch?
I expect I was the man that nominated him as president. I expect I was. I wouldn't, if they had any documents on that, I think it would show that I nominated Homer Welch. We were real close friends. Thought a lot of each other. I bought a sewing machine from him. My wife and I were talking about that before you came up. Yeah, we visited my daughter up above Atlanta at Lake Lanier up there, and they moved in this house, and in this moon room was just everything tumbled up, and I saw her mother's sewing machine sitting there, and she had said she was going to sell most of that stuff that was in there, and I just told my wife a while ago, I said, I hope she don't sell that sewing machine. I don't believe she will, but anyway, Homer Welch asked me one day, he said, Harry, I'd like to sell you a new Singer sewing machine. He says, some people's had it about 4 months and they can't pay for it. I said, my wife would like to have one, but this was during the early part of the Depression. I had a boy born in 32, and this was in 31 before he was born. I said, I don't know how I can pay for it. He said, well, I said, how much I have to pay down on it? I said, my wife needs one. He said, you won't have to pay nothing. You'll pay $1 a week when you get it. and he had the machine put in my house because we were real good friends. But he was an agent for Singer sewing machine people.
Homer was.
Homer was.
When was this one?
But he was also working in the mill when the mill would run.
Now, tell me about what Homer did earlier. In this picture, this is in 1925. What was Homer doing in the mill?
27. I really don't know, honey. He came from over in Alabama, someplace over in Alabama. But he was a real nice person, and his job in the mill, the first job he had in the mill, they had a thing they called a dope wagon. That was his job, push this thing all through the mill, and people, they had lunches on it, people to buy. He'd push it twice a day, because then we was working long hours. He'd get in the mill, and he'd be in every department within an hour and a half. People would come up and buy what they wanted, and get a Coca-Cola for a nickel, a ham sandwich for a nickel or a dime, something like that. If you had a nickel or a dime.
And Homer never worked with the machines? He didn't?
Oh yeah, he later worked in this plant over there, the old mill plant. He later worked over there, and he worked in the beaming department. Now, you don't know what beaming is, but this is where they roll off, they have a creel there with thousands of tubes of yarn on it, and they all come in there together and make a huge beam of maybe 60 or 70 or 80 foot long, inches long. And they'd put this on the loom, back of the loom, and pull it through the reeds, and then they'd get it going, and then they'd put the shuttle going through there to weave it into cloth. Mm-hmm. And this is what he did. He was a beamer hand in the beaming department.
Homer was a beamer hand.
Yeah.
Now, if you nominated him, was this, when do you think, when did he start organizing?
Beg pardon, Anna?
When did Homer start organizing in the mills?
Well, immediately. We all did. They were all did. There was very few people that didn't join it, because they joined it for $1 a month. And people was reaching out for something other than what we had. Well, the mill company wasn't paying the people as much as they could have paid them, I felt like. I can tell it to you both ways. I felt that way myself. I had a wife and some children. I worked 65 hours a week, and I had to work hard to make $7.
And weren't you working 40 hours at that point when the union started organizing?
No, when we started organizing, we was working on 8 hours a day. Yeah, this is after Roosevelt was elected. He was elected in 31, took office in March of 32. And he began to, things that he was on his platform began to roll around right fast. And one of them was that people had a right to organize a union for whatever purpose that they wanted to organize it for, to have better living conditions and better wages. This is well documented in Congress, I'm pretty sure.
Now, when he passed the NRA,
Beg pardon?
When Roosevelt brought in the NRA and the Blue Eagle and told people that they could organize, how quickly did Hogansville start to mobilize after the NRA came in?
Well, people in Hogansville began to organize as quick as a union man came in here. They scattered out all over the country, organizing textile plants and other people who were large enough groups to organize in whatever type work that they were in. And so when they sent word that a man would be in to talk to some of the leaders in the community about organizing, that's when he showed up. We went up to the railroad cut. we talked it up, and I guess we must have had 200 people up there. We didn't know where else to go. About a mile up above Hogansville up there, up 29 Highway.
Was it a secret?
No, it wasn't a secret, but we weren't trying to keep it a secret, but we just all wanted a good place to go, and a lot of, back in them days, you just go up there and shoot crap, play poker, something like that. You know what shooting crap is, playing poker. It was a good place for that.
Now, was Homer the leader from the beginning? What was Homer's role?
Well, Homer was, he didn't, other than doing what everybody else was doing, he's going around getting people, talking to people and getting them to sign up and join, come up to the union, come up to the city hall. At the city hall, we signed a lot of people up there at the railroad cut. And this man who was with the union,
Hallahan?
I think his name was Hallahan, I believe it was. He was there, and he had the things that you sign them up on, the blanks, whatever you call them, registration blanks, and passed them out to people, get the dollar, sign them up, turn it into him, and that's what we did. And so we were all right in there together on that thing. I was just as strong for it as anybody. But as I said, I told you the story, and I don't have to repeat it, but I can. But that knocked the props off of me what I thought the union was going to do for people. I thought if the union couldn't carry out and do their job, what do they expect manufacturers to do, or anybody else?
I imagine.
Now, the other man, Mr. Barker, he didn't leave the union. I left. And Mr. Barker, you asked me the other day about a Rainwater girl. Was she Maudine Crouch or Maudine Rainwater? Now, this is one of my first sweethearts, and we'd like to got married, would have it hadn't been for her mother. She married a Crouch.
Couch.
But her,
Couch.
Couch. But her sister married Mr. Barker, and they were two of the strongest union people ever was in Hogansville.
Which sister?
Maudine's sister.
What was her name?
Oh my goodness, I thought I'd never. Luther, and I can't call her name right now. She was a sweet lady.
Can you move it a little closer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me put my mouth in this thing, okay?
No. Now, could you talk? How did Homer feel about this union? I mean, was he a passionate leader about it? What was his response to all of this?
What was the response to it?
No. What was Homer and the union?
Well, when we got enough people to organize when we got enough people together to organize Hogansville industrial people at the mills into a union. I think when we brought it up on the floor, who we're going to have as our officers. And since I was in there in the thick of it from the start and worked with Homer, I thought Homer would make a good man. And the best of my remembrance, I nominated Homer Welch to be president of the Hogansville Local. And we got a second, and he was elected just like that. Unanimously elected. Nobody else wanted it. And then other people were elected to other offices. I was elected as recording secretary.
And as president, what would you say? What was Homer's responsibility?
Well, his responsibility, I would think, would be just like any president of anything. The main thing, the theme then was let's get out and get to work and get everybody that worked in the mill. Well, some of them overstepped the limits and boundary there and began to sign up people that lived in town had never been in a cotton mill. And this hurt the cause a lot. When you sign up your police force, your sheriff's department, your firemen, and your preachers, and nurses, and doctors, they have no business in a textile union.
Well, why did all those folks join?
Well, they thought it was helping the people out here. But in the long run, it hurt them. In the long run, it hurt them.
How did it hurt them?
Well, from a company standpoint. Company had their own emergency unit, what do you call it, a dispensary. They had it equipped in the plant and hired nurse at not LPN, but the other, what is it? The highest.
RN.
RN. Hired an RN nurse, and later they put her in a house out there, in a nice house, and furnished the house. And they had beds in there, and they even had tonsil clinics with the doctor. Take your kids' tonsils out for so much, the company would pay half, and you pay half.
Locked up at Fort McPherson too?
As far as I know, he was. I think he was carried up there from Union Jail.
So
He had to make bond there, and then they carried him on up to. I'm not positive about this, but I do know that they took the guardsman frisked him and found this gun on him. They took it off, but police came in there, and they took him away from there. But I think he went to town, was able to make bond, and they carried him on to Atlanta with him. Well, the rest of them.
No.
I'm not positive about
I
that.
actually
It's
read-
been so long, but I think that's the way it happened.
I read an article that Homer was quoted as saying that he had a permit for a gun.
Homer Welch.
Yeah.
Well,
And that he was put into Fort McPherson and that he had a permit for a gun.
that ain't the way it was. And who wrote that?
It was just an article in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.
Well, that's not the way I heard, not the way it was told to everybody else.
So did people come back here and tell? I mean, was the news flying all over Hogansville about what occurred up there?
Yeah, the news was flying all over for 50, 75 miles around you over in Alabama, and all the plants that they stopped off. It'd take them 4 or 5 hours to get there. And they stopped them off. I don't know how they got by with it without some of them being hurt. I didn't like that to start with. I didn't have no part with that, nothing like that.
You mean
Of
the
course,
flying
I'd already gotten out of the Union.
The Flying Squadrons.
Yeah, I would never belong to that thing.
Now, that's what Homer organized, didn't he?
Yeah. Go close the other mills, the other plants down, wherever they were. But he wouldn't go down in the valley, they call it, down across from West Point, Georgia, into the valley. I had to go down there and get my wife's brother out of jail. He carried some of the boys down there that wasn't in the Union, but they wanted to go back down to their old home down below the valley and fish and hunt. And my brother-in-law carried them down there, and when he went back to get them in 4 or 5 days, one of them had a hunting rifle, and they threw it up in the back of his back windshield, up there in the back seat. And the guards, they stopped every car. And they look you over and say, well, you look all right. But when they started off, one of them noticed this rifle up there, and they stopped them again.
No, this was during the strike?
This was during the strike, yeah. The people were in the barbed wire fence during this time.
And there were National Guardsmen in the Alabama border who were checking the cars.
No, these was people at West Point Manufacturing Company hired.
Okay.
They weren't National Guardsmen, but they had machine guns set up waiting for the people from Hogansville. And they stopped the car, and then they decided to search the car. Well, they had about a half a pint of whiskey.
Now, where this is in West
Now,
Point,
this
Georgia?
was down at Lynette, Alabama.
In Lynette.
They had about a half a pint of whiskey in the car, and nobody was drinking or out of the way. My brother-in-law went down and got two brothers and a brother-in-law. They were good friends of ours. And so they just went down there to hunt some. And so one of them, brother-in-law, two of them had a brother-in-law that was a second hand in the mill. And he knew a lot of people over in Lafayette who was, it was the county seat of the county that they carried them. And he got me to go down there with him to get some of his brother-in-laws out of jail too. They was all in jail.
Why were they in jail?
Well, they locked every one of them up was in the car because they had that rifle in their main thing. But when they got the whiskey out,
Now, did you get to go back to work right after you quit the union, or was the Hogansville mill closed for 3 weeks?
Hogansville mill was closed down by management. There was never a strike in Hogansville. They put up notices in the plant. We're not going to have a strike in the U.S. Rubber Company, company-wise, textile division. We're closing down all the textile plants in Hogansville, Winsboro, South Carolina, and other places up north that had some plants. They closed them all down, keep from having any problem whatsoever. But it's necessary that some things had to go on in the office. Bills had to be paid and things like that. And the people who were responsible for this, when they started around to work, they'd knock the windshields out with these green sticks. Just knock them out and knock them in the head if they didn't like it.
So the strikers were standing outside the mill making sure
Oh,
no one would go
they
in?
stood out in the highway. Anybody that turned to go in the mill, they stopped them.
And how long did that go on for? 3 weeks?
That lasted for, I guess it must have lasted for 6 weeks. Yeah, a long time. My dad went to work on the WPA.
During that period of time?
During this period of time, they had the WPA, and they never did give me a job. But the U.S. government come in and through the food program, I forgot what they called it. They hauled truckloads of food up here for the people to feed their families, and I got in on that.
So you weren't working at all?
I wasn't working at all. All I was doing was catching catfish and having a good time. I was waiting on them to sign me up to go to work. But my daddy worked. He worked hard, and he was older than I was, and he worked hard cutting down trees and things like that. They cleaned up places in the swamp and things where the water could flow better.
Now, what was Frank doing during this whole time?
Frank was going to school.
High school?
Beg pardon?
College? High school?
No, he graduated in 1932, I believe. Frank, I don't believe he was working at all. He was, hard. It was hard to get a job, and I don't believe he was working at all in 34. He might have been. I don't think he was.
I was wondering how your uncle got tipped off. Do you know?
I had no idea. I never did ask Uncle Will. I figured that's something he'd rather not talk about. He had a lot of good people that was involved in that thing, that had gotten involved in his plant, that he didn't want to have any trouble with them. And they hadn't got fully organized, but they was hot enough they wanted to stop the mill off.
No, they didn't arrest the people from Noonan. They sent them home, right?
Did what?
They didn't arrest the people from Noonan.
Not anyone from Union. It was R.D. Coal Manufacturing Company up there, which built all the boilers and tanks that was shipped all over this country. There was steel workers. I worked there once when I was younger. And the Coles lived, the back of their house was right in front of the office at where my uncle was. And so they came down through the garden, and one of them crawled over a little fence and came down the bank to see what was going on. And they was rounding the people up and putting them on the truck, and they put her on the truck.
Who was that?
There's Mrs. Cole. She was the wife of the president of R.D. Coal Company, which was much richer than the textile mills, I'm sure. And the sheriff went over and told him, so you don't want her. She's not involved in this. She just came down there out of curiosity to see what was going on. But the sheriff had to talk pretty strong to the head of that guard man. Said, well, what was she doing out here? So they took her off the truck. But she liked to got locked up now. I mean, like went up to the Fort McPherson with that crowd.
What did you think of your friend Etta May getting locked up there?
Huh?
What did you think of your good friend Etta May getting locked up there?
If I was to tell you that, you wouldn't have enough paper to write it out. I loved Etta May just like a sister, still do, her and Leone. We was kids together, and I helped them so much, especially after Leone's husband died. And but Etta May really got hot-headed about this union thing, and Etta May just speaks what she thinks, and she doesn't care who it might hurt, who it might be about. She just, if it's black, it's black. If it's white, it's white. Did you notice that when you talked to her?
Somewhat.
Oh well. And Etta May is not just exactly right now. You could have met her five years ago. But you can't hardly carry on a conversation with her. She's going to do all the talking. But I would never say nothing to Etta May when a picture came out in the paper. And she called us scabs. Everybody in Hogansville that worked in the plants that didn't belong to the union was scabs. And I didn't know what scabs was, but that's about the lowest thing it could call you. That didn't bother me, but and there wasn't any trouble about it. Once the thing was over, it was over. Everybody took time to heal the wounds, to bring the families. I'm talking about family, like me and my children. Their families was busted up. My family wasn't, but families in the union and families, parts of the family that wouldn't belong to the union, they wouldn't speak to one another for a year. Some people get sick and die, and some of them wouldn't even go to the funeral. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad condition existed here at that time. And the mill company used all of the, let me see, if you really want to, in politics, they used everything they could into the easiest kind of way to bring people back together. They wanted to see the families come back together as families, and they worked hard at it. The company did.
Now, what happened to those folks that did join up? Did they get in trouble from the company?
Did they get in? Well, not much more than the company tried to. They tried to stay out of it, and they did stay out of it, and they wanted their people to, they didn't like the idea of what they was doing because it was giving U.S. Rubber Company a bad name because they thought all of this, but this fellow and some of his top people that came down here with them, they told them what to do to organize into flying squadron and go and stop these other mills. And this didn't sit well with the company. But they helped those people out. They helped them get back on their feet. They kept the jobs. I don't know, but Homer Welch lost his job, and one other person. And that's the only only ones. And the supervisors who was on the union side had to change over. They talked to them pretty straight. You're a boss. You're representing the company. Now, if you want to be on the other side, we'll put you on a job, put you on wages, which would cut from salary to wages was a big cut.
Now, was this the superintendent or the boss?
Huh?
Was this the same boss that had urged you to join the union?
That had what?
Was this the same boss, superintendent?
The one that told us,
Yeah.
he was one of them, yeah. Yeah, he was one of them. And he changed, he got himself straightened out because he couldn't have gone anywhere else with the reputation that he had because of what he did and gotten a job like he had. They gave him this privilege. You straighten out or we're going to let you go. He didn't belong to the union, but he supported it.
What did he do you said that he could have got a job anywhere. What did he do?
He was you have an overseer over a department, and overseer's assistant is called a second hand, or shift supervisor. And that's what his job was. He was over all the people too, and it was his responsibility to keep everybody working and the material flowing through that department to carry it on to the next department, step by step by step.
So you think he would have been blacklisted if they didn't give him his job back?
Think he would have been blacklisted?
Yeah.
I think that if he hadn't stopped his. Now, in fact, he apologized for getting mixed up in it because it was very important that he save his job. He was making about $35 a week, and that was a lot of money back. The top man in the plant wasn't only making but $300 a month. I saw that myself and looking through some files down there one day. I found it where he was asking for a raise to $350. And with $300 a month back in the early 30s was a lot of money.
Yeah.
My office was next to his office, and if I was in there working up reports and he knew I was in there, he'd knock on the wall. I'd just get up and go around. I said, "You need me?" He said, "Well, you're doing something you can't turn loose?" I said, No, I can turn anything loose if you need me." He said, "Well, I need you." He pulled his desk drawer open, get his checkbook. He'd signed his name down there. He says, I want you to take my car. I couldn't use his car. Give me his keys to drive his car and go to certain people's houses that had worked for him for years. And he knew they were in bad shape because of illness in the family. He said, "You go there and ask them how much money they need. And you fill out the check for it." And I did that. And I went to this man's house. And then he got a brother on
That's
him.
Homer Welch.
No, he sat next to Homer.
Oh,
He must have
okay.
thrown her.
Uh-huh.
And he got a brother sitting on here somewhere. I'd have to find him. I went to his house too. I don't know exactly, but he's on there. And some of the other people, a lot of people. I went to 4 or 5 different people's houses that had worked for him for years over in this mill. And now they were working over here. And when I'd come back, he never asked me a question at all. I'd give him his checkbook, his car keys. He didn't ask me how much I wrote it. He says, "This is between you and I until the day that I leave this world. Don't ever tell a soul." And I didn't. When I looked down in the coffin at that man, they say, "You can't take it with you." But I saw hands there that give things away to people that needed it, nobody else knew about. H.J. Daniel. Man right there.
None of these women are alive?
There's not anybody on there that I know of that's alive now. Not anybody. Now, some of them moved away from here, and I don't know, but the ones that I do recognize, I can't call all of them names, but I know they're dead. Even Homer Welch is dead.
He died 2 years ago.
I played ball with one of his brother-in-laws, one of the finest ball players in this country.
And was Homer basically run out of town after this
Beg
strike?
your pardon?
You need to talk close. Was Homer run out of town?
No. Nobody run home out of town.
Can you talk into the
Homer
microphone?
stayed here and was involved in, he was involved in the church work. And
So after 1934, Homer stayed here, or he went away?
well, now you're getting into dates there, and after 1934, I think Homer left and went back down into Alabama from where he came from. And he never did go back to work for U.S. Rubber Company, put it that way. U.S. Rubber Company came here in 31, and all this happened right after they come in here. They started up the mill. The mill had been closed down for months. None of us had been working. We were all starving to death. The Depression shut it down. And so they bought it out from New England Southern mills, both mills. And they started it up, making tire cord. They put in new machinery and everything to make what they're making.
No. And how did you get this picture?
How did I get
Yeah.
the picture? You know, that's a good question. I believe that someone that I knew gave me that picture that worked over there, asked me would I like to have the picture.
Okay.
And I asked my brother, would he have this run in the little paper that the mail issued to them. And they did run a picture of it in the paper, just like they did the band pictures and all the other pictures. All of this was good for the people and good for the company. Public, good human relations.
Giving out photographs.
Beg your pardon?
Giving photographs out to people was good human relations.
Yeah.
No, I would really love to be able to talk to somebody who was in management back in the 1930s, maybe during that strike. Is there anyone you could think of at all?
Not a one. They're not living anymore. Just recently, the latest manager they had, when they tore down Reed Mill, he passed away with a heart attack. He was much younger than I was. Mr. John Hartley. I can't think, Judy.
Okay. Yeah.
You're not going to record this? Okay. Hogansville was one of the nicest. Let me see what happened now. Yeah. The first prisoner that was released from the Korean War was a boy that lived right out yonder, about half a mile from here. A little bitty fella. And my son Bob was working in New York City then, and he told me, he said, Daddy, the New York Times had picked this thing up, and you never seen so much writing. He sent me a copy of the New York Times down here. And they came to Hogansville to talk to, they had a big day when this boy was released, and they went to Newnan and met the Army officials, and they turned him loose, turned him over to the mayor of the town, and they come on down the highway, and they had a big parade through town honoring this boy. And the New York Times, and after all of this trouble was over, Hogansville had come back together during the Korean War. And when the Korean War was in the late 48 and went into 50, Eisenhower was elected president, and he got this thing stopped.
You know, George read a really well written history of Hogansville.
Beg your pardon?
There's a history book that was written about the history of
I
Hogansville.
got it here.
And
About half truth.
really,
Well, they don't know what they're talking about. I could read, I could straighten them out, but I wouldn't do it. They mentioned my name one time. somebody else organizing the band and being a band director and all that. It's the far off base about that and other thing, but there may be one better than that. Maybe another history book.
Well, George said he was very surprised that they mentioned civil rights and they mentioned the black community
Yeah.
in it, and they mentioned the civil rights movement, and they mentioned voting rights and that kind of thing. So they mentioned everything except whenever there was ever any time when they tried to organize here.
Yeah. They
And
avoided.
he said that just wasn't in there
They
at all.
avoided that. They avoided that. There's never been a town that I know of that's had good relations, race relations with the people, whatever the color or creed was, than Hogansville.
No, but he said in this case they didn't ignore it. They were very.
Huh?
He said in this case they didn't ignore race relations. That in this history
Yeah.
they didn't ignore it.
No, they didn't ignore anything.
No.
They've worked out everything.
He said the only thing that they didn't talk about in the history was organized labor and the union.
Yeah. Back in early 1920s, before I came to Hogansville, when Hoover was president and Coolidge was president, the black people were in the high offices: postmaster, chief of police, city clerk.
I don't believe you.
You don't believe it?
Here in Hogansville?
No, I was here. I came in 23 and 24. But everybody knows that.
And the black people had high posts?
Yeah, they was a postmaster, chief of police, and they weren't one or two white people on police force. Wasn't much police force then. They'd washed for people all over town, cook. They'd look after the babies for a week at the time for $2.50 a week. I know what I'm talking about. I hired some of them. But I wasn't making but $7 a week.
Yep.
It was hard on all of us, but we had good relations. Some of the best friends I had, when I was managing the baseball team here, we had been down to Manchester, Georgia, which is down in Meriwether County, about 35 miles from here, to play ball, and we'd always stop at cafes and eat after the ball game, and I'd pay for it. I had money that the company gave me to pay for it. We used the company truck, one of their trucks, to haul the ball team down there. And while we stopped at this place that we never had stopped at before, and everybody went out, got into there, and for the truck driver, who was a black man.
J.T. Terrell?
Huh?
Was it R.J. Terrell?
R.J. Terrell was one of the best friends I ever had. R.J. Terrell will tell you the same thing. You can call him on the phone right now. I got to go see R.J. He's getting too old for me not to go visit him. I used to go visit him a lot. He and his wife used to come see me and my wife. When R.J. was driving the truck and I walked in that man's restaurant, he said, "Hey, don't bring that nigger in here." I said, "Well, I'm the manager of the ball club and he's our truck driver." I said, "I don't care who he is and who you are." And all the boys were sitting down waiting. Some of them had already started ordering. I said, "All right, boys, get up from there and let's go." They said, "What?" I said, "Let's get out of here." And they come over. I said, "What's wrong?" I said, they don't want R.J. to come in here and eat. And if he can't come in here and eat, I'm not going to eat. And you guys are not going to eat. If you do, you're going to pay for it, and that truck's going to leave you here. So they all come out of there and got on the truck. We left. R.J. Terrell will tell you that same story today.
We interviewed him.
Huh?
We interviewed R.J. Terrell.
You did?
Yeah.
Well, if you interview him again, ask him about
I will.
Ask him about men and the time that I wouldn't let the ball club eat on account of.
He's a beautiful man.
He's R.J. and his wife. They had a good family, and what I got to go see him, I thought the world. I was a tall fella, and I haven't seen him in, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years.
And you know McKinley Marchman?
Who?
McKinley Marchman.
Yeah, I know him. Yeah. I told you about going maybe to the ball game and out in Candlestick Park in San Francisco, and these boys of Jerry's was little, and I'd go out there and stay weeks at a time after I retired, my wife and I. And we had to go to the ball game every day. Either go to see the Oakland team or the San Francisco team play. And so one day they said, this man that broadcast all of his name was Milo Hamilton. Broadcast all the time. So we'd like to see him. I said, all right, we'll go see him. And so I carried him up to his broadcast booth. I told Milo who I was. I said, I live about 60 miles below Atlanta between LaGrange and Newnan. He said, I know exactly where you live. He said, these some of your kids, some of my grandkids, and I'm out here visiting. I said, they live out here. They just wanted to meet you. He said, well, that's fine. He talked with them and bragged on them, you know. And he asked me, he says, anybody you'd like to say hello to back in Hogansville today? I said, well, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. He said, well, tell me some names, give me some names. I said, my brother Frank Barton and a black man named Charles Green. He pushed cotton trucks.
Arthur Green or Charles Green?
Charles Green.
Who was Arthur Green? Because Mr.
It could have been Arthur. It was one of the Green boys, black boys. Good. He said, nobody else. I said, this is the black boy and the other my brother. Well, when I came back home my brother told me, he said he had driven to town and was fixed to cut his switch off and had his radio on. When Milo came on, he says, called my name and my grandson's name, said they're all here and rooting for the Braves, and says he wants to send greetings to his brother Frank Barton in Hogansville, Georgia, and the Green boy, a good guy, worked down there in the cotton department. And you know, I expect there's 100 of them guys that knew me down there. Said, hey, next time you go out to California, says, have Mr. Milo to call my name. I had a list about that long. Well, I went anyway. That year, this was in '73. They had the All-Star, Major League All-Star game of both leagues, National American League, in Atlanta. And I had tickets to it and my son-in-law and I, and so we went up, took our seats, and I had the camera and made a lot of pictures of the players out on the field. I had a good seat, not far from the field. And I noticed this lady sitting across the aisle from me. I was on the end seat, and there was a vacant seat there. Well, in a few minutes, here come old Milo walking up through there. And he walked on up there and sat down, it was his wife, put his arm around her. He wasn't broadcasting this game. The network was doing this. It wasn't the Atlanta Braves network. It was the national network. Managing the ball club, carrying the band off. We'd go to places. He drove the truck. And he was just as good as I was. If I sat down to eat, I didn't mind. I wouldn't mind him sleeping in my bed or eating at my table. That's how much I thought of him. And you happened to meet him. How did you do that, honey?
Runda Parham.
Runda Parham. Let me tell you, can I tell you a little thing about Runda Parham?
Sure thing.
Well, Runda was Leone's husband's brother.
Right.
And when Runda was a little bitty fella, Leone's husband and Runda were half brothers. When Boots' mother died, he married this younger woman, and he had 4 or 5 boys by her. I don't think he had any gals. But anyway, Runda, they wrote a thing in the Hogansville Herald here about a year ago or more about let me ask my wife something. When it's about the store, honey, about Parham Store. And it used to be up there where St. James Church is, which up Granite Street, a brick church there. And they moved it from there. They left the store up there and come down and built a new store down there where the store is now. It's right there on SQ, just a little piece from where Leon lives. Red store on the right. And Boots ran that store for years and years, him and his daddy and his son, Boots' sons. Rhonda hardly ever worked in there. It wasn't a family store. It was between Boots and his daddy. And when I read that, I says, and it said Rhonda Parham, I signed his name to. That boy don't even know what he's talking about. So I come over here to the phone, I called Rhonda. I said, Rhonda, I was reading an article about the Parham store. Said, yeah, you like it? I said, no. I said, why? I said, because you didn't know what you was talking about. He said, what do you mean I didn't know what I was talking about? I said, about where the store come from. He said, oh, man, tell me, I was raised up in that store. I said, no way. I said, that store was at least 500-600 yards further up the road up there, street up there. And they moved out of the old store building, about to fall down. They built that new building down there, moved in it. He said, man, you're wrong. About 2 hours later, I said, okay, I just thought I'd tell you. About 2 hours later, the phone rang, boy, he was apologizing. He said, man, how do you remember all this stuff? I said, well, I just know, I knew you was wrong, and the paper was too. And you was called the paper being wrong. So he had it corrected in the paper. That's that story about Rhonda. Now, Rhonda was, he worked for the company, but he was in what they call the standards department. The standards department, they checked his people that he worked would come to your job and check you, everything that you did.
Like a Beto man?
Huh?
Like an efficiency expert?
Yeah, efficiency expert. And when they started this kind of thing off, they called it the Bedeau system. Frenchman started this. But that name got to be pretty sour, especially among union people. And they changed the name of it to the Standards Department. The Standards Department come around and check you and see if you was running your job efficient. If you wasn't needed, they'd recommend that job be closed down. And that's why he headed up that department for a long time.
Now, let me ask you something. We're talking to people who can speak from many different perspectives about the 30s. And who do you think we could go to that could talk from management's perspective in Hogansville? Are you the closest person that we've come to? Or is your brother?
You couldn't talk to my brother. You don't want to talk to him. You just don't. I'm telling you the truth now. My wife tells you the same thing. You go to him if you want to. But he'll probably hurt your feelings. I know he will. If I took everything that he said, my wife will tell you, he talks to me kind of rough over it sometimes. And that's all on account of the sales busters. And his boss could do no wrong. He was industrial relations manager. My brother worked under him as manager of, we hire the people.
Personnel.
But his boss could do no wrong. And I thought he was all wrong, 100%. I don't mind telling him. I tell him that now. And later on, the plant manager felt the same way. Wondered why he kept him so long. But he will strongly defend asbestos. He tell you that only one person maybe died in Hogansville on account of asbestos. And I'll say there's 35 or 40 died here on account of asbestos.
Now, in terms of...
And you don't talk Frank Barton now, you know. Please don't.
Well, I
So
saw.
you're too nice a person to.
Well, I met him.
You met Frank?
Yeah, I met him on his doorstep. He was very nice to me.
Met him where?
I met him. I was with Etta May, and I met him.
You was? All right. What do you have, Teddy?
Yeah, he was very nice. He was busy because of his wife, you know.
Yeah. Well, she's going through quite a problem, and he told me today, I can't find the picture. He said, you know, I've gone through so much. And Frank gets all excited, and he's highly emotional, and
So back
he's a
to
good boy now. Let me tell you, I love him. He's the only brother. He and I and that sister of mine, the only ones left in my family. And I'm the oldest. Frank's 70, about 78. And she's she's born in 1915, however many years that is.
So back to my question, and he's 78. So was he working in 1934, Frank?
No, I wouldn't think he was working then. Hard time.
No, he was about 19 years old. Or 20.
He graduated in 1932. They had the state championship basketball team, and he was one of the best basketball players I ever saw in high school. People, he just hired people, and he wasn't in management. He knew very little about the.
Did Frank start hiring people? Was that his first job in the mill as personnel?
Was that what?
Was that Frank's first job in personnel?
No. His first job was in the mill. Marking, putting a mark on, roping on bobbins and stuff before it be identified down the line further. And just flanking around in there. And he learned how to run fly frames a little bit. And he got sick. And one of the guys in it was in personnel, was real close to him. And when he got able to go to work, he told him, said, I got a little job down in the office, in the personnel office. We need some things checked on. Just want to know if you felt like coming down there and working maybe a month or two. And he said, yeah. Well, he started that, and he never did leave the personnel office. He worked on up to employment manager.
Well, that sounds like on some level.
Everybody thinks a lot of Frank.
I'm sure.
I expect I'm the only one. I think a lot of him. I love him. He's my brother. But I don't like some things about him. Maybe he don't like some things about me. He expects his wife to get up and cook 3 meals a day. I never have it. That's my third wife, and she's never had to do it. And my second wife didn't. I had to stop her. And my first wife, I stopped her after all the kids come along. And I can look after myself, as far as that's concerned. She's going over to the lake, stay 2 weeks. I'm gonna stay here because I need to stay here and take care of myself and not be involved in nothing. And she ain't gonna worry about me. She got that telephone now.
Is that right? You worry a little. Just a little.
Her son is coming up from Florida, Hollywood, Florida. He's the one that was a jockey.
Oh, great.
And Frank can go so far with you, and then he'll get kind of rough with you. I mean, you ask him a question, and your question is him again about something. This kind of gets next to him. Well, I told you before, and it's like that.
Uh-huh. I see. Okay. So but I'm just saying, other than Frank and yourself, because you got a job in management later on, right?
Let me think a minute here, honey.
I mean, it doesn't matter. They can live away from here. They don't have to even live in Georgia. They can live somewhere else.
Can you cut that off?
Oh, yeah.